let's come to the first managing approach. It's managing through, and I want to explain it also to the listeners. Managing through refers to a scientific management approach that focuses on experiment and testing to learn about the supply chain and their cyber risks. Could you please tell us how you think that this approach has changed over the last 30 years, Ray?
Yeah, this was really interesting, especially as a concept. Once we were doing and going through the research, I found this very interesting personally, and it helped me reflect a lot. So if anything, I would suggest to the listeners and the viewers of this video, our colleagues, to think about this as well and how we've evolved. Managing through. And this is about making sure you understand how you evolve. And for example, I mentioned earlier on about working in the aircraft industry. And in there, we had a very mature approach to manufacturing and working with our partners. Now, in security, supply chain security, you would have a contract, you would place a contract with someone, even in the defense industry, as much as, you know, the private industry or the public sector. You know, there was very few that really stipulated specific things on the supply chain. And unless you were really in defense and defense contracts where it was very different, then most of us were dealing with general stuff. And what I mean by that, it starts with, again, we didn't really understand who our critical suppliers were. And for us, we were asked to undertake these audits by our business. First of all, it was the audit team that were being asked to do this, and our business was asking us to do these audits. They were dealing with audits from a, as I said, quality perspective. We were then asked to undertake these audits, and I use the word audits. It was very basic. It was using something for us, even with our international partners. We use something called British Standard 7799, and I'm sure a number of you on this, you know, conference will recognize that. You know, it evolved to also form part of ISO 17799 and then 27001. You know, so it was very, very core to what we did. But it was a paper-based audit. You would go out, there's checklist, randomly you would test things. And we realized very quickly that we needed to do more than just a paper-based audit. We would talk to people. We would go out and do physical visits to key suppliers. Now, our key suppliers at the time was based on not the criticality of the data, but it was based on the scale of the contract that we had actually placed. And the business had asked us then to go and do these audits. And we decided that we would make sure that through this process, we would demonstrate to the business that we would add value. We would not come back and just be that typical security person and team of everything is no, you can't do it like that. So that was critical, right? So we used something to be able to ensure that we had a standard against and a consistent standard for all of the partners, which was BS 7799. We put it into a checklist. You know, it's fantastic when you look at it because, like the ISO standards, there's many, I think there's about 1,100 control objectives when you get into it. And people don't realize that. But also we would do these physical audits. We'd walk around their sites. We'd look at their buildings. And, you know, one of the funniest audits I think we talked about was we pulled up to one of our key supplier sites. And I said to the driver of this car, I said, can you just stop? And I said, tell me what's wrong with this picture. And in front of us was our key supply site, key manufacturing site. And right next to it was a propane bottling site. So these gas bottles, the ones that, you know, you fill with gas and you see the ones, you think you've probably all seen them, orange or red or green bottles, you know, and they can be small, they can be, you know, some of them are nearly, you know, I think about 5 feet tall or 1.4 meters. They're huge. And this site was next to our key supplier. So we then started asking about, so what are your disaster recovery plans? What is your, what we would call today business resilience? Oh, we don't really have any. Okay, maybe we need to think about, let's help you. And that's a key thing I would suggest to the viewers is what we didn't do is just say, oh no, this is no good. Go back and write a report and say it was terrible. We said, right, this is what it is, but how can we help you? What experience have we got that we can help with? So that was the evolved learning for us, because we found when we went away and just wrote, oh, we'll come back and we'll see that you fixed it. That was no good. That wasn't a partnership. That was also not helpful to our suppliers, because you write a report and it becomes an audit report and it's not helpful. You want to be able to help. So that was one of the key things that we learned through this. As I said, we also felt a little bit amateur, but we also at the same time, we started to doing basic network checks, and we were doing basic testing on the environments. We'd get their agreement, we'd do that. We also wrote certain things into, for example, our contracts with them about what that would mean, and about disaster recovery, and at this time, cyber insurance as we know it today wasn't around. That started to introduce itself. So in the 90s it didn't, but it did introduce itself in the early 2000s, and I've personal experience of seeing it around 2002-3. That evolution was critical. We as an organization, as we evolved through the 90s, managing our supply chain and our partners through evolution, we learned. And this is what I would suggest to the viewers. It's about learning and not stopping. It's evolving. So for example, when I talked about the audit reporting that we would use, we went just from using one type of report to a number of types of reports as they became more available, as the industry evolved in the 2010s and the 2020s, right? Sorry, through the 2000s and through to 2010s. As more organizations came on, we took advantage of those that were becoming available. We created and used, for example, pest reports. So this is reports that would look at the political, the economical, the social and technological impacts on us as an organization. And then we would say, how does that affect our supply chain? Today, if you look at what's going on right now with the Ukraine and Russia, many organizations are doing exactly that, looking at that geopolitical stance. How does that affect us? And how does it affect our supply chain? And that, again, is critical. It's about evolving. And then how do you help them? How do you build in business resilience? How do you build in all of those items to help you as an organization and help your supply chain survive? We've seen what happens, multiple different examples of supply chain failure. And this is about us trying to ensure that we help them have the right ability to survive, as much as you knowing what their criticality is to you. I think those are some of the key things. And like I say, the evolution continues. Evolution, for example, with now from that fledgling supply chain, cyber insurance from AIG back in 2002-3, when I saw that as a partner. Things like where we see bug bounty, working with bug bounty programs. All of these can help, and this is how we evolved. So you manage it through continuous evolvement, continuous learning. But the biggest change that I see is moving from compliance to assurance. It's not just, here's the list, we've done it. It's, okay, you've done it, you've said you've done it, now let's test and prove it's there. That's the assurance. It's all too easy just to tick the box and say, yes, they've done it. Again, that does come back to understanding the criticality of that supplier.